Hey, hello everyone. Good morning and good evening to everybody out there. This is Nelle out here along with Varsha, and we are going to walk you through some of the interesting topics here today, which is mining real-world data to identify factors that impact payer approvals in US. But before we get deep into the topic, I would just like to give a brief introduction about me, the speaker right now in LA, and also Varsha, who is my colleague along with me here. So I'm an experienced management consultant with 9+ years of experience in data analytics, and have been with pharma space for almost 6+ years, working across the entire pharma ecosystem almost on the commercial side. And I have an IT degree in my undergraduate, and then my MBA is on marketing and finance. So, and I lead our RWE team along with the data science projects here from ITG. Now, I also have Varsha with me, who is my colleague, and she has over 5 years of experience in commercial analytics space with in-depth experience on APLD data, helping our clients in advanced analytics using APLD, IC, and then forecasting as well. And she has been instrumental in revolutionizing and streamlining the transition of different pharma clients, especially using our RWD analytics in the recent timelines. But with that introduction, let's get on to the topic. Before we deep dive into the topic in detail, sorry, I'm hearing some noise. If somebody can mute themselves, that will be helpful. Okay, so before we deep dive into the topic on analytics, I want to just give a brief overview of specialty pharmacy, specialty drugs, and hub. And the RWE data sets, because they are going to play a very important role in the use case that we are actually looking at today. So if you look at what is happening in the specialty drug space, this market has been evolving very rapidly over the last few years. So if you look at it, the dispensing revenue in US for the specialty drugs in 2012 was only 21% for the specialty drugs. The remaining 80% of the dispensing revenue was almost coming from traditional drugs. But the trend kept on increasing, reaching almost up to 50% in 2019 for the specialty drugs. Now, this is a pretty vast growth, and this growth is something that we are also going to see in the next few years as well. The FDA statistics actually says that almost 60% of the pipeline drugs that are there for approval in the next 2 years is all specialty drugs. Now, the other important thing about the specialty drugs is that just 48% of the overall dispensing revenue that we have, that we see in US is only for 2% to 4% of the overall patient population. So that's such a staggering, costly number that we see for every patient on an average, because the remaining 96% of the population at least is all on traditional drugs, and that's contributing to only the remaining 50% of the drug dispensing revenue at the US, right? So that actually puts more emphasis on how the patient's experience is going to be in the specialty drug market for the pharma manufacturers. So for that, the specialty pharmacies have started to play a much more important role, because the traditional pharmacies are quite different, because for the specialty drugs, you need a special storage system, and then you also know that it's pretty costly, and then the inventory has to be maintained properly, and then there are also quite a few services that the specialty pharmacies are actually expected to provide to the patients. So with that different kind of a setup and different expectations that is being required in this market, in this space, specialty pharmacies have started to come up along with the growth in specialty drugs. And as you see here, some of the key services that these specialty pharmacies offer include insurance verification along with prior authorization, financial support as and when needed for the patient, and which means they redirect them to the required pharma manufacturers or to the foundations. We'll see that in a little more detail in the later section. And they also actually help patients with adherence, and then also they are responsible for on-time delivery of the medications. Now, let's see briefly how the specialty pharmacy actually works when compared against traditional pharmacies. Right? Now, what usually happens in the healthcare ecosystem is that the patient goes and visits a HCP, and then the HCP treats the patient and then actually prescribes a drug for the patient. Now, the prescription is actually sent by the provider to the pharmacy, and if that prescription is a specialty drug, then as you see here, the approval process by the payers is pretty complex. the payers have put in these restrictions, especially because the drugs are costly, and then they want to ensure that every penny that is being spent in the healthcare ecosystem is actually valuable and it is reasonable. Therefore, what they, as you see here, the process actually starts with the physician sending the script to the specialty pharmacy, and then the specialty pharmacy initially checks with the provider on the script that's being received, and then they start the processing. When they start the processing, the first thing that they do is benefits investigation, where they actually look at patients' clinical characteristics and the disease that for which they have been prescribed the drug, and then they also look at the insurance information, and they'll get to know at that point in time, they'll be able to confirm if they have tie-up with the payers to get the drug reimbursed for the patient, for the plan that the patient has been on with that payer. Now, what might happen is that sometimes a physician might send a patient to a specialty pharmacy that might not have tie-up with the payer where the patient has been enrolled in. So in those scenarios, the specialty pharmacies will triage it to the another right specialty pharmacy, and that new specialty pharmacy will then start with the subsequent processes. So the key process that you actually see is the prior authorization, where a specialty pharmacy care coordinator usually works with the payer, and they also work with the HCP to get all the required information filled in the prior authorization form. That is actually that has a lot of information on the patient's disease information, and then how the patient has progressed and why the drug has been prescribed for the patient, as mandated by the payer for that patient. Right? So once they do that paperwork, or it's been pretty automated these days with different software. Once that is being done, what would happen is that the prior authorization form would be actually sent to the payers, and then the payers would actually review, and then they may either approve or reject it. Now, if they're not satisfied with what is there in the PA form, then they can actually reject it with some rejection reasons. Now, once it gets rejected, right, the specialty pharmacies again work with the payer and the provider to fix that rejection cause, because certain causes are more easier to fix, like some of the fields are missing in the form, so those things have to be fixed by them pretty quickly, and then they can send it again with more compact information, this time through an appeal. Now, what might happen with an appeal is that the payer can again reject it due to various reasons if it is not falling within their policies. So at that point in time, still getting appealed, then the specialty pharmacies can actually redirect the patients to a pharma manufacturer to get them enrolled in a copay program if they have a commercial payer as one of their payer plans, or they could actually send them to a foundation if they are Medicare patients or Medicaid patients. So these pharma organizations through their copay program or foundations through their charity can help patients with their out-of-pocket cost, because these drugs are pretty expensive. They help them with out-of-pocket cost, and then they pay on behalf of them, and the patient has to pay a pretty nominal small copay out of his pocket, and eventually the prescription will get filled and the patient picks up the drug. So as you have seen, it's a pretty complicated process, and it's very burdensome for the patient as well. The patient may actually get his drug either prescribed, either approved at the first prior auth itself, or after an appeal, or he may not get approved at all, and he might have to seek a financial assistance and eventually get on a drug. But when you see traditional drugs, right, it's pretty straightforward, where once the patient has been given a drug, the provider actually sends it to the pharmacy, and then the patient actually goes to the pharmacy directly and then gets the drug. But there are a few challenges that the pharma manufacturers are seeing in this space, as we have seen in the previous slide, right? So the growth of specialty pharmacies and the specialty drugs have been coming up very vastly. So there are a lot of claims, a lot of patients and prescriptions coming in the market. Now, with that being with that scenario, what is happening is that the manufacturers feel that there is some compromise on some of the services that the specialty pharmacies are providing. Like they feel that the turnaround time for prior auth process is pretty high on certain cases. That is actually causing the patients to drop off, and eventually, which is a loss in revenue for them, right? So they're seeing issues like that, and then sometimes when the specialty pharmacies have to report report the sales, that they are seeing some gaps in that. So they feel that again, adherence also, they are not able to follow up with patients pretty clearly. So they feel that there is a need for improvement, but they don't have a complete control over specialty pharmacy, because The specialty pharmacy is not for one pharma manufacturer, right? So the specialty pharmacy actually sells drugs from all pharma manufacturers. So what the pharma manufacturers actually came up with was they thought they want to have a lot more closer connection with the patients. So they actually thought that could be another avenue that they could get into, which is hub. So with hub coming in, they thought that they could solve a lot of these issues that we were seeing with regards to adherence, or with regards to turnaround time, or with regards to certain other services with regards to patient experience. Right? So now, when it comes to hub, so hub is more like a central point where a patient can actually reach out to for anything, and then the hub can actually get all the queries for the patient sorted out. So it's like a one-stop solution that the pharma companies are actually looking at. So the way the landscape has changed when hub actually came in into this services is like a prescription is actually coming from HCP first, and then it actually goes to the hub directly rather than it going to the specialty pharmacy, right? So now what hub does is that the hub does all the prior auth services. They connect with the payer, they connect with the provider, and then they do all the prior auth work. And then when they see that sometimes there are a lot of rejections and then there are a lot of appeals that they have to go through, they actually also do so they actually put the patient on a free drug until the process of benefits investigation and prior authorization gets done. So the initial drug that the patient actually gets is free, so that they don't lose the patient. And once the prior authorization process all gets completed successfully, they actually send the script to the specialty pharmacy. Now the specialty pharmacy comes into picture, and they actually connect with the payers with the approved prior authorization form, and then they get the cost reimbursed for the drug for that patient, and the patient also eventually gets the drug. Now, again, when things don't go well with regards to payers, the hub again can connect the patients with pharma manufacturers or foundations again for a financial support, and eventually get the patient on therapy as needed and get the drug. Now, one other additional thing that's actually evolving is nurse navigators. Now, we discussed about adherence, right? So it's not just important that the patient starts on therapy, but it's also more important that the patient actually stays on therapy. What specialty pharmacists used to do is that they used to have follow-up calls or follow-up emails with the patients, or remind them either through app or through calls or different mechanisms or multi-channel mechanisms. Now, what Hub actually does is that they they actually, in collaboration with the pharma manufacturers has a separate team called Nurse Navigator. They actually put the nurse navigators in touch with the patients, and these nurse navigators actually connect with patients to provide them a better experience, right? So they help them with injecting a drug if it's an injectable, help them when to take the drug, help them stay on therapy, help them being compliant or to assistant, and then ensure that any concerns that the patients actually face, they actually put the patients in touch with the hub, or they put them in touch with the right third-party vendors, or put them in touch with the right people within the pharma, or right entity as needed, so that they can get their issues sorted out and then ensure that they still stay on there. Now, so this is a pretty different setup as you saw, right? So now, with regards to hub, there are a couple of different models that is predominant in the market these days. The pharma companies can either have the hub internally, or they could outsource it to a third party. So when the pharma companies have to have their hub on their own internally, there are a lot of HIPAA compliances and restrictions, legal restrictions that are there. They have to be firewalled from the sales and marketing organization, because the physician health information cannot be, all the physician health information cannot be shared with the sales and marketing teams, right? So when pharma companies actually choose to go ahead to have the hub internally, then they'll have to take care of firewalling the rest of the company from the hub services, so that they are able to share only the required information to the rest of the company. So that is other way. That is other restrictions that the pharma has to take care of. Otherwise, they'll end up paying a lot of fines and fees. Now, the other model is the hybrid, where pharma can have certain services internally, like nurse navigator and stuff, and they can outsource part of the services like benefits investigation and prior auth, where they can have a separate hub just for their company products alone, a separate team sitting there and supporting. And no, and then they take care of all of those patient experiences in a smoother way, and eventually get the patient get the drug response to the patient. So this is how the hub space is evolving, and both hub and specialty pharmacies have been operating in tandem these days. They're collaborating and then ensuring that the patients actually get on therapy and eventually get cured. So that is the main objective for which the hub came in, and these two are still evolving. In a recent survey that was conducted, what we see is that even with hub, like 83 pharma manufacturers are not happy with the third-party vendor hub provider model. So the biggest concern that they have been seeing is that the hub has been facing challenges in communicating with the providers and patients on time. Like 67% of them feel that that's the biggest concern that they have been seeing with the current model in hub. And because of these issues, there have been also some gaps in the process flow changes or workflow changes, and that is room for efficiency that they see. And additionally, they also see that they're not technologically mature. By that, what I mean is that the digital space is still evolving. The reporting solutions are still evolving. The pharma companies, when they want to see what are information that can be shared with them, they see that it is not still clean or certain information is all missing, and that reporting solution they think is probably something that could have been improved a lot more, so that they can use that data to make some valuable insights. Now, the other issue also that they see is FTE or resources review, where the case coordinators that are put in touch with patients, they think they also could do a better job of being more efficient and then get things done around on time. Now, having said that, both specialty pharmacy and hub provides a lot of information, a lot of data that is more valuable, that can be leveraged by pharma companies for taking a lot of business decisions. But having said that, they both as standalone might not be helpful to take the detailed information or the detailed business judgment that they want to take. So for that, what we have to do is that we also have to integrate them with real world evidence data. Now we can see how these data sets that are actually coming from specialty pharmacies and hub data sets can be combined with real world data to make valuable insights for our use case that we are just going to look at shortly. I'll pass it over to Varsha right now to take over and walk you through the real world evidence.
Thanks, Nele. So before starting off with the case study, let's go through the different real world data that's available for us. So as we all know that the world is exploding with data, our actions are getting captured in one way or the other. And the same holds true with the healthcare data too. Starting off with hospital account level sales to going in depth about patient level information. So let's say if I visit a hospital, then whatever services I have received, like getting diagnosed or any surgery or treatment, it will be captured in the EHR data. Even post that, if I buy a drug from a pharmacy, then all such information like drug dispensation date or the order date, the quantity will be captured in the pharmacy data. Later, let's say if I go for a particular set of lab tests, then my lab results will also be captured and saved. Once all this is over, when I submit, let's say, the claim form to the insurance company, then all the information like the kind of services I have availed along with the out-of-pocket cost spent by me or the claim status, the rejection reason, if it is rejected, the payer plan, the channel, everything will be captured in the claims data set. But as critical or sensitive information it may sound, my information will be present, in the form of anonymous patient, so that at least I can't be tracked. So now next we have various social media platforms like Facebook or Twitter groups, different forums wherein patient can share their personal experience, about the drug, that how well did it affect them, their emotional journey through the entire treatment process. Then we have something called hub data, which I think Nele has already talked about a lot. So it captures all the patient's drug level information, like if it is approved or rejected, or if rejected, then what exactly is the case. Then we have various disease registries, which are basically a collection of secondary data related to patients with specific diagnosis or condition or a procedure, and plays an important role in post-marketing surveillance of pharmaceuticals. Later, we have the mortality data, which is the compilation of mortality information by age, gender, cause of death, geography, and time period. These are generally maintained by at the country and the WHO level. Finally, we have our internal pharma insight sales. Now, with so many data available, the next step is basically to understand that which all data sets will be required for your analysis. In our case, basically, we needed different APLD data sets along with the hub and specialty pharmacy. So quickly hopping over to the case study. So basically, the case was that our client had a very expensive yet very effective specialty drug in the market. Now, even though the efficacy was quite high, there were a lot of cases wherein the drug claim was either getting rejected. So the client basically needed to our help in understanding, the patient characteristics the payer consider before taking their decision, and also if we can compare the clinical outcomes of the approved versus denied patient, so that they can see the drug benefits coming right out of the actual data. So this will kind of prove as an evidence for them. Now, before jumping on to the analysis, the first step that we should always follow is to create a well-planned process flow. In our case, we divided our task into three sections broadly. The first section was to create the APLD dataset, as in prepare the APLD dataset. So first we started off with jotting down different potential factors that we could get from APLD. Then since, as in we have variety of claims and EHR data available to us, so the next step was to select that, okay, which of these datasets will be the most suitable one for the analysis. And once we have finalized the APLD dataset, then the final step was to create the business rules so that we can handle the data nuances and get the most relevant patient pool. With all these done, the next step was to link my APLD dataset with the hub and specialty pharmacy dataset to get the exhaustive information, on which further we will apply different ML techniques to get the insights that the client is looking for. So with this done, let's talk about the details that we did for the APLD dataset preparation. So at first, we were jotting down the various information that we can get from the data, starting off from patients' demographic condition like age, gender, race, ethnicity, to patients' clinical information like their comorbidities, concomitant drugs usage, or their history of diseases, their lab reports, their histology or genetic history, their provider specialty who is treating or diagnosing them, the location where they, as in the kind of facility they are receiving the treatment, their payer channel like Medicare, Medicaid, commercial, the claim status, and if it is like let's say rejected, then what exactly is the rejection reason. So once we had jotted down all the points that we can get from APLD dataset, next we started evaluating different APLD dataset. So we performed a quick EDA to understand the data coverage. So we started off by studying the total patients available in the database versus the patients who are crucial for me, that who are either diagnosed or receiving treatment related to my interest and should have the continuous enrollment. So with all these conditions applied, we saw that the claims dataset 1 was having the maximum coverage. With this said, we were losing some lab related information, but we had to take a hard call to take the best patient pool so that we can get the other relevant metrics, which is of more usage. So with all these done, and finalizing the APLD dataset, the next step was to create the business rules so that we can take the most relevant patients. So we started looking for applying business rules like the patient should have either of a valid diagnosis or treatment, should have a continuous enrollment in the analysis period, as well as the look back and the look forward period. So with this, we have our APLD data set created. So the second step was data set linking. Now this is the most interesting part. So here basically we had APLD data set as well as the hub data set individually available. So obviously both these data sets will be having different patient IDs. So we need to create a mapping so that we can map APLD patients with hub patients. So we connected with our client and further connected with the three vendors, and basically the crosswalk data vendor along with the help of APLD and hub data vendor tried to create a mapping so that we can map APLD with the hub data vendor. With all these steps done, we were now left with 4 data sets. The first one was the APLD dataset, which captured information like patients' demographic and clinical information. Second, we had hub data, which captured patients' claim information for client's drug, like if it is approved or rejected, then if it is rejected, and whether it is withdrawn or PAP. Then third, we had specialty pharmacy data, which captured approved drugs information like their dosage information, and also an ID so that we can map the specialty data with the hub data. And finally, we had the crosswalk data. But all these data sets were available separately. So the final task was to create an exhaustive data set which captured the beauties of all these 4 data sets together. So we took hub data as our base data because it captured 100% information of my drug, as in the client's drug, whether it is approved or rejected. Then we further joined it with APLD dataset to get patients' demographic and clinical condition. So here in APLD, what happens? There are a lot of cases wherein the RX information doesn't get captured, yet the patient ID will still be available. As we can see, around 71% patients are getting mapped with the hub patients. So the patient ID were present, but the RX information wasn't. At times, it was missing. So at that time, hub data and specialty pharmacy data helped us to get the patients in as in detailed RX information so that we can filter on the valid uh, records. So with all these joined, now we had our uh, overall data pool created. Then we applied the business rules like the 12-month look back and look forward along with the continuous enrollment, and reached out to a pretty good set of patient pool, wherein 44% of the patients were having approved claims versus 56% of the patients were having the decline, their claims as denied. With all these done, the next step was to do some statistical analysis. So we applied methods like chi-square and Wilcoxon rank sum, and observed that the patients who had shown the characteristics of having a set of chronic diseases or related comorbidities or concomitancies, or having a history of diseases, they were having the higher chance of getting their claims approved versus the patients who were showing no symptoms or very limited comorbidities or some cases of acute diseases were having the higher chance of claims getting denied. So this was the view that we got from the overall market of US. But when we again further started validating it at individual geography level, we observed that there were cases wherein the patient was falling in the other bucket, as in they were the case wherein they were having as in history of comorbidities and were receiving concomitant drug related to the therapeutic area, yet their claims weren't getting approved. So this was a good insight that we got from the data additionally, and we connected with our client and we mentioned them the same so that they can use these data points as evidence for those payers and try to get their drug approved and get the formulary status. So this was the analysis that we studied for the pre-period, that why the drug is not getting approved or rejected. Next, we did a certain set of analysis to understand that post the drug is received by a patient, what's exactly the condition. So that Nele will take us through. So over to you, Nele.
Thank you, Aisha. Yeah, so as we have seen here, right? So with regards to specialty pharmacy drugs, you'll face a lot of challenges with payers with regards to approval because they're pretty expensive. So the clinical trial results alone in most cases are not sufficient, right? So we might have to get into the data sets as we saw here, and we have to come up with some evidences. So we looked at evidence as Varsha was walking us through in the pre-period, which is the point before the payer actually approved or took a call to actually approve or deny a drug. And then we saw more severe patients were actually approved a drug versus lesser severe patients were being denied a drug. But again, this was the overall trend that we saw in US. But when we drilled deeper into certain geographies, there were certain payers who are actually deviating from this trend. So we saw there was a potential for our client to increase their revenue in that scenario. But as we have seen in the past, with regards to the scenario, so just getting insights from the pre-period, the point just before the patient got on the drug alone is not sufficient. The payers also look for outcomes after the drug has been dispensed to the patient, and they want to see evidence through that. So we also recommended our client to look at the outcomes also along with the pre-period impact that we have actually seen. So for that, what we'll have to do was so we'll have to ensure when we have to substantiate the impact of a drug after its usage to the payers, we'll have to compare a patient pool that is similar for those who have been approved versus who have been denied. So for you to ensure that the patient pool was similar for the approved versus denied group, we turned to ML techniques. So for that, what we did was we looked at the patient comorbidities before the index period, which is at the point on which the payer either approved or denied a drug. And when we looked at the comorbidities and ran it through a logistic regression with the target as approved or denied. And then the logistic regression actually gets you out the propensity score. So the propensity score is nothing but something that varies between 0 and 1 towards the target variable of either approved or denied. Now, what we could do is that once we have the target, once we have the propensity score generated for both the approved patients and the denied patients, we need to match them using matching algorithms like either greedy matching algorithm or various different algorithms, which we'll discuss shortly. Now, you match the patients and based on propensity score to ensure that the patients with similar characteristics are matched. So, for example, a patient with a propensity score of 0.5 should get in the approved group should get matched with the patient with the propensity score of 0.5 or 0.51 in the denied group, so that you can ensure the characteristics of the patient with the approved and the denied group are same when you look through the whole cohort, right? So that was the idea, so that you are able to match the patients similarly. Now, the patients who are not similar between both the cohorts are dropped out of this analysis, and then we actually investigate only the patients who are actually similar between both the groups. Now, what might happen is that once we do this matching process, it is also very important to look at exploratory data analysis and ensure that the patients in both the groups are similar. Sometimes when you find differences, you can make the matching criteria stricter. I mean, either you could use optimal matching or you could get into a hybrid scenario, right? You match them based on propensity scores. Now you could add another criteria on top of it that the patient from both approved group and denied group should have been diagnosed with diabetes as well, just for the sake of an example. Now, if the patients still have a similar propensity score between approved and denied group, but still, if one of those patients have diabetes while the other does not have diabetes, then you still drop that patient from your analysis. So these calls with regards to what other additional criteria you will have to match the patients on apart from propensity score has to be taken on a case-by-case basis based on the market that we are looking at, and based on the key comorbidities for that market. And once you do that, you can be pretty sure there is no bias with regards to the patient cohorts in both uh, approved and denied cohorts. And then you look at the comorbidities, you look at the outcomes after that, right? So now you go forward by 6 months. Now there's a patient from approved cohort who has been on the in our client's drug for, let's say, 6 months and has been taking the treatment continuously, while there is a patient from the denied cohort who has been taking a competitive drug for 6 months continuously. Now, after 6 months, you look at the comorbidities that these patients actually have. Now, you don't look at it individually, as we said, we look at the whole cohort of approved and denied. When we do that, we see that the patients who have been approved on our client drug actually had lot lesser comorbidities against patients who actually had been denied the drug and who have been on competitor. So this came up as a pretty important evidence that could be actually taken to the payers in those geographies, along with the insights that actually Vasha was walking us through, along, like the patient has to be severe uh, before they get on the drug. So along with that criteria, we also saw the outcomes were more impactful on severe patients when they take our pharma manufacturer's drug against a competitor's drug, and thereby they can take it to them and then improve their approval rate. So this was pretty important for them, and it actually had a lot of uh, traction in their internal team for the other drugs as well. They could actually implement it, so that they could actually realize it a lot more relevant to them, what they have been actually seeing. So with that being said, now I think we can summarize what we have seen so far in this presentation. So moving to the last part. So first we started with hub and specialty pharmacy background, right? So once we started with that, we saw how they are playing an important role, and how the data sets can be collected from both hub and specialty pharmacy, how it can be integrated with real world data sets, and once they are merged, we saw how powerful it is actually to uncover new evidences like the patient characteristics that the payers actually look at when they approve or deny a drug, or the post period you can actually look at the clinical outcomes and see the impact on approved patients versus denied patients. Now that we have substantiated the impact of the approved patients, it actually helped improve the approval rates for our pharma manufacturers, and that increase the revenue for our client, and it also decreased the overall spend for the payers, right? So overall, it was a win-win situation. So the payers were pretty happy because they saw that the drug was working against a competitor drug, which means it's lesser stress on the healthcare ecosystem and the cost, which means they are going to spend lesser on those payers, on those patients' insurance, and at the end, the pharma client is also actually going to get a lot of revenue by getting the right patient on their drug. Now, with that being said, the most important thing on top of it all is that it actually helped the patients in the market. So if you see, it actually helped their well-being. They had lesser hospital visits, and there was lesser time between the successive hospital visits, and there was also lesser use of concomitant drugs by those patients. So it helped them a lot, not just pharma company. So we saw that analytics, when used in the right sense, can uncover a lot of new evidences, a lot of surprises, and then it can add a lot of revenue for your clients and then save a lot of cost for your payers in the healthcare ecosystem. But on top of it all, it can also help your patients. And that's a way that we analytics professionals can actually uh, help our society in a way when it used right way. Thank you. With that, I think we can move to any questions that the participants have. Okay, I see a question where someone is asking, why do we need to use logistic regression only, and can we not use any other algorithms for generating propensity scores? Yeah, that's a very valid question. So the reason that we use logistic regression was that this is not actually a fine tuning technique, right? So this has been widely used. That is one reason, and then the propensity scores generated by here are then eventually matched using 3D matching algorithm. They are it's not that they're actually used for any prediction, but they're actually used for matching patients with similar characteristics. So when you ensure that your matching criteria is actually proper, then you are actually going to ensure that the patients with similar characteristics are matched, which is the eventual goal before we look at the outcomes. Now, with that being said, not just logistic regression, but also other classification algorithms can also be used to generate propensity scores, and they can also be used. And those propensity scores can also be eventually used to match patients between approved and denied cohort, and then improve the approval rates as well. Okay. And the next question that I see is with regards to how much was the match rate that we were able to get when we were able to combine specialty pharmacy hub data along with APL data. Yeah, good question. And yeah, it's a very challenging thing to do in the market as well, right? So patients, I mean, we were able to match 70% of the patients. For our market, it might vary depending on the market that you are in. It could vary between 60% to 70%. So yeah, it again depends on the market, but the usual trend is that 60%, 70%. But whatever numbers that we have shown is all for illustration. Okay, any more questions are we having from anybody? The other question that I have here is, can you talk about, you spoke about different models in Hub. Can you talk a little more about different models that is there in the specialty pharmacy? Yeah, that's again a good question. So specialty pharmacies broadly are under three, can be broadly classified into three different business models. One is the bigger ones, CVS Caremark, the PBM payer-owned specialty pharmacies, right? So that is one. They are the major players in the market. And the second one is independent specialty pharmacies. The third one is hospital-owned. The hospital-owned specialty pharmacies, as the name suggests, are those that are actually within the hospital. Both the independent specialty pharmacies and the hospital-owned specialty pharmacies are actually facing a lot of challenges against the bigger players in the market, which is the PBM-owned specialty pharmacies. So they are finding it very challenging to strike a contract with the players to dispense the drugs, and they're also spending a lot on margin because they're not that huge enough as well. So yeah, so that has been another thing that has been going on. So that is why that is also one of the reasons why probably the manufacturers started looking at different venues like Hub, whereby they can actually improve the patient experience. Because what happens is that with specialty drugs, it's all limited distribution channel, and when they actually have a tie-up with either independent specialty pharmacy or hospital, the patient volumes either low, or even if the patients actually come into the market, what happens mostly is that they end up with denial, and then the physician actually have to send the patient to a different, or the hub has to actually send the patient to a different specialty pharmacy and then get the drug eventually dispensed, which actually increases the turnaround time if you see again, and thereby might cause a drop in patient adherence or patient new starts as well. So that's why different solutions are now been evolving in the market. Let's see how it goes. Okay. The other question is, won't it be too costly if we use these many data sets? How SP APL data set crosswalk? Good question again. So if you see that with regards to specialty pharmacy, right? So this is actually mostly 85% of the pharma manufacturers actually have at least one of their drugs through limited distribution channel. So which means that the APL data sets have lesser capture of these specialty pharmacy drugs. So they have to rely on a data that has better capture of their actual own sales. So they turn to specialty pharmacies for that, because one of the services that specialty pharmacies also offer is the information on drug dispensing, and they share that information only for their clients, right? So, and hub is something that is again internally managed or either outsourced to the third-party vendors. They are again in there for a reason to improve patient adherence and also provide a better experience to the patients. And APLD datasets, as you see, is all broadly used across different companies these days. Now, uh, now, as I said, you don't have the sales of your specialty drug in APLD dataset because of the channel that it is going through. Now, for you to take additional insights, you'll have to definitely integrate, because if your drug is so costly, like if it's costing like $40,000, then certainly something you'll have to. The companies are ready to invest for crosswalk, and it's a one-time investment for them to actually go to the place to show the evidence after the drug has been a little mature in the market, so that uh, they can take valuable insights, and the return that they get out of it is actually a lot more higher than the investment that they have. Okay. And then what is the next question? Sorry, finding it a little hard to read. You saw this RW data. One second. How does manufacturer use this RW data sets? If my question is right from Nathala. Sorry, I can't understand your question clearly. Yeah, so let me talk about it, right? So the RWD data set, these are different. Real world evidence means you can have data sets in different formats. One of those is specialty pharmacy, one of those is hub, and the APLT is other format. So all of these are real world evidence data sets, and these are all been brought together. It's more powerful to take more valuable insights. I hope I answered your question there. The next question is, can't we map APLD and hub data ourselves using fuzzy matching or other techniques? And that's another good question. So certainly, most of the companies, what they do is that, as far as my knowledge goes, they actually map based on geography and other patient demographics information like age, and then based on the recency, based on the date and stuff, and other advanced fuzzy matching algorithms that they apply. We can certainly try and attempt to do it, but again, with regards to matching, when we actually go to the third-party vendors, they actually de-identify the patients because they have access to the raw data. What we have access to is all de-identified patient information. So they are able to do it a lot more better, and with a lot more confidence, we can use those data sets to actually combine and then generate more valuable insights. And then, yeah, what are the methods that you have actually used to improve your model? So yeah, so as I said, like logistic regression basically helps you generate the propensity scores, and then after that, the improvement in accuracy is more with regards to greedy matching algorithm. So you could either use greedy matching algorithm, or you could use optimal matching algorithm, or you could also use a hybrid approach where you use greedy matching and then you put additional conditions like certain diagnosis the patients have to have, and then you match on those criteria to ensure that the patient cohorts between both approved and denied are actually similar, and eventually you're able to take insights out of it. So the key question, the key process here is with regards to matching, so that you ensure the patient cohort before and after, sorry, before the drug was either approved or denied is all matched with similar characteristics. Now, the next question is, how do you accommodate for imbalance in the data sets? Again, a good question. So when we match, what we do is that we use pair matching. So for example, if the denied patient cohort size was actually 500, and then the approved patient cohort size was actually 300, eventually after we match them based on propensity scores with similar characteristics, we matched one patient with from approved group against a patient from a denied group, and and then when you do this matching, it will eventually end up at 250, 260 or something. So that's how when we do the outcome evaluation, we'll have to do a pairwise matching, so that the size will certainly come down against where we started, but it'll ensure that you are looking at them in the right way. So there was another question. Where do you get the different numbers from the slides? So these are all something that we actually can do desk research and get it. And there are a lot of information that is available online as well, and a lot of uh, papers are also being generated by different players in the market. And we also, when we work with our clients, work on these information and gather that information from them. It's a mix of the information is coming from a lot of sources. And then the next question that I see there is, from a player perspective, how important of a role do models like budget impact, cost effectiveness, cost utility, value-based models, etc. play in decision? Certainly, right? So the payers are facing a lot of stress in the healthcare ecosystem. So the reason that they brought in all step therapy prior authorization is all to ensure that whatever insurance cost that they're incurring is all utilized rightly, and then the utilization expenses are actually going down. So certainly they also do a lot of analytics on their end to ensure that they get the drug to the right patient, so that they eventually get the cost down. And there are different contracts, different innovative contracts in the market. So what we looked at was an evidence-based contract, and there was value-based contract or finance-based contract, different contracts that are coming up in the market, so that they can actually ensure that the money is being spent rightly and they are able to save as much as they can. So the next question is, what are some of the key challenges that are faced during this analysis? So one of those challenges that key challenges that we faced was with regards to data mapping, because we had to actually recommend our client to a third-party vendor and get in touch with the third-party vendor, and then also ensure that the matching was all done accurately. So the more important thing is to ensure that you get the data right. So otherwise, the insights that we take out of it is all not going to be helpful. So once the initial matching was done, we had a lower match rate. The mapping file that we actually received was pretty low, and then we actually had to work with our data vendors along with their clients, and then recommend different matching techniques apart from what they have been actually following. And then we also refine the matching for them, and then eventually improve the matching rate of approximately 70%. And we got a more strong data set. Then what was the impact of this analysis in companies' revenue? Yeah, so again, right, so this is so we saw that 5 to 7% of increase in sales was observed in our clients revenue. For one of our clients, usually it again depends on the market and depends on the challenges that you are facing, but pretty much around 5 to 7%, which because the cost of the drug is too high, it actually turns into millions of dollars, which is more valuable for them. There was a question on, is there any specific reason for going with 12 months look forward and look back conditions? Okay. So when the players actually take a call to actually either approve or deny a drug, they look at the patient comorbidities, and now the usual history that they actually look for is either 6 months or 12 months. Now, based on our market and the disease area that we were actually exploring, we felt 12 months was more relevant. That's why we went with 12 months. And then in the look forward, what we did was, we based on the clinical trials that have already happened, we saw that the drug is going to be more effective. The drug impact can be actually seen within 6 months. The clinical trial was also run for 6 months. So similarly with the competitors as well, it was a similar scenario. So we started looking at the outcomes after 6 months of drug usage on both the competitor side and our client side. So that was the reason for picking up 12 months in the look back and then 6 months in the look forward. And see if I missed any questions. think we have pretty much covered quite a lot of questions. And there was another question: how did we actually come up with statistical analysis like chi-square or with Cox and ransom in the pre-period? So we were looking at the volume of, I mean, in the pre-period, we were actually looking at the proportion of patients between approved and denied cohort. So the proportional test is actually best tested for significant differences through chi-square. That's why we went with chi-square for patient proportions. And Wilcox and ransom was actually used for certain continuous variables. So what we did was we also were able to uh, generate. This was one of the challenges, right? So you actually, when you look at the APLA data, you end up with a lot of comorbid conditions. So there are a lot of attributes that you'll have to address. Sometimes what we do is that we actually combine them into certain indexes like Charlson comorbid index or certain, where a lot of comorbidities can be combined into single index. So that becomes a continuous variable. Now, to figure out if there was a significant impact between two different cohorts on terms of continuous variable, we actually go with Wilcox and ransom, which is more similar to a t-test, but it actually looks for differences in. Okay, I think we're almost towards the end. Seeing if there are any other questions coming up. One more, I think. Why was continuous enrollment business rule necessary? Because we wanted to ensure the patient continuously stayed on therapy so that the impact of the drug can be actually observed. Therefore, we have to ensure the patient has been active throughout our look forward period to know that the patient has been either on our client drug or on our competitor's drug, and therefore you can actually substantiate the impact of your client's drug in this case. So that's why we need to ensure. If the patients are not non-adherent, then we can't actually substantiate the impact of the drug on the patients. Therefore, we'll have to ensure continuous improvement. Okay, I think we have covered pretty much all the questions, and thank you all for your time. And I hope you all learned something today from us. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer you anytime. Thank you, everyone, again. Stay safe and goodbye. Good night. Thank you. Bye bye.
Goodbye.